We have Deputy Carol Nolan, please.
Taoiseach, in the last week, the perception of the EU Just Transition Fund and its capacity to act as a catalyst for economic revival in County Offaly suffered a fatal blow. Of the 18 million available in the latest round, Offaly, the county that without doubt has been hit the hardest and indeed bore the greatest brunt of job losses at 53% of the job losses in our county, got a paltry sum of 500,000 from an 18 million fund under Just Transition. As you can imagine, this has been greeted with great disappointment, frustration and anger. And only yesterday, Offaly County Council arranged a special meeting with all of the county councillors and Oireachtas members. I attended through Zoom. And I concur with what every councillor said, of all party and none, that we are not being treated fairly in County Offaly in regard to what I call an unjust transition. I have always found it very difficult to buy into the concept of a just transition, because I saw the damage that would happen to the county when the Bord na Móna jobs went, with no alternatives in place, and indeed with a process that was flawed right from the very beginning, because it was accelerated with no forward vision and indeed no plan for the county. We now find ourselves in a situation where many viable projects were deemed to be unsuccessful when the applications, which were worked on by Offaly County Council Chief Executive Anna-Marie Delaney and her staff. Yesterday we spoke about this. It's just not good enough that 500,000 has been offered to the county, considering the damage that has been done to our county, to our economy. We need intervention, and that's why I'm bringing it up here today. I'm also bringing the views of the many county councillors of your own party and all parties and none that were present at the meeting, and I'm calling for you to intervene. This situation, as I say, I've highlighted right from the beginning that I was very concerned about the just transition. And also I've called for special recognition to be given to Offaly, given that we were expected to carry the burden of 53% of job losses in our county, which is massive. And I've repeatedly argued that there is a clear and unanswerable case for County Offaly to receive the highest proportion of the funding from the Just Transition Fund. And unfortunately, perhaps we should have seen what happened in terms of the 500,000 allocation. Perhaps we should have seen that coming, because in 2022, a spokesperson for Minister of State Pippa Hackett, who's also from the constituency and represents the constituency, confirmed that Offaly had not been designated by the government as the county most disadvantaged by the decarbonisation process. Taoiseach, you only need to speak to your fellow county councillors and workers of Bord na Móna to confirm that we are indeed, unfortunately, the most affected county. And we need urgent intervention. So I'm calling on you today, please, to make a commitment that you will intervene in this matter, because it's of utmost concern and it's of utmost urgency.
And I'm not quite clear as to your doubts about the Just Transition programme, but I think it is an important programme. It's an essential programme to deal with what has been a decarbonisation agenda across the country, but obviously with a particular focus on the Midlands and Offaly, which has been at the frontier, if you like, of transformation and change in terms of energy generation and in terms of the Bord na Móna transformation, which has been very significant and will benefit Offaly in terms of the investment in Bord na Móna, which is quite substantial. I think you mentioned the EU allocation. As you know, there's been far wider investment, so I don't have readily here a breakdown of the totality of investments around the whole area of decarbonisation in terms of investments in the community more generally in Offaly, and there's been quite a significant degree of investment in Offaly and across the Midlands under a range of government investment programmes. Up to 22 million was available under the National Fund by the end of 2024 of this year. The EU Fund will provide up to 169 million until 2027. So that's a longer term transition for the region. And that arises from the end of commercial peat extraction and peat-fired power generation. And in my view, and I certainly will examine and reflect on what you have said, and the government is very anxious. Indeed, in my view, just transition has to become just transformation, because it's not just about the ending of certain types of economic activity. It has to be creation of new, very powerful alternative industries that can create alternative employment into the future. And I was just at the offshore wind energy conference this morning. The onshore wind energy performance of this country, notwithstanding all of the objections and so on, has resulted in thousands of jobs, but also critically has resulted in Ireland being one of the most effective renewable countries in terms of up to 35% of electricity at any one time now provided by renewables and so forth. So there is an economic agenda, and there is, I accept your point, there's an economic need here, and those areas which have had to, who are impacted the most, need the greatest levels of support and intervention. I agree with that. And that has to be through a combination of national funds and European Union funds. And I didn't have, prior to coming, the specifics of the applications that Offaly County Council made, but I will, again, I know that Deputy Barry Cowan has been a long-standing and a very committed activist in respect of Offaly in the Midlands, more generally in respect of this agenda. And I'll certainly engage with the deputies and with the councils from the area to examine this situation further.
I just again want to reiterate that there hasn't been any proper, sustainable job creation as a result of what happened. So in my mind, this process will not be seen as just by me and by many others in the county until we can actually see jobs being created. Now, the job creation is going to be highly dependent upon the investment that comes in. And the fact that we have only received €500,000 out of an €18 million pot, it is scandalous. It's a national scandal. It has to be looked at, because we need this type of money to be able to create jobs. And I know indeed the applications that went in from Offaly County Council that I just mentioned, you know, they were relating to towns like Tullamore, they were relating to areas like Shannonbridge and Road in North Offaly, where there were projects that would create jobs. And we're trying to work our way out of this mess by trying to move forward and create the jobs that we so badly need in Offaly. But again, that can't happen. And particularly if we're only given 3% of a funding pot, it's just not acceptable. We need urgent intervention, and I do accept your constructive response, and thank you for agreeing to look into the matter. But we need some urgency as well.
Thank you, Deputy Nolan. To conclude.
There is a national fund, and I don't have the breakdown of the national fund in terms of its allocation to Offaly and other counties. I think you're talking specifically about the 18 million that was under the EU, and the EU is about, I think, 100 and, I mean, there's obviously further allocations to be made from the EU fund, because the EU fund will provide up to 169 million. You said there was 18 million allocated to date, but there's 169 apparently until 2027. Now, maybe some of the projects may not be ready for this particular allocation and maybe will be funded through further allocations. But what I will do is I'll examine the situation and will revert back to the deputies from the region, and we'll talk to fellow ministers as well in respect of the issue, because we want just transition to be effective and successful. We need to transform the counties that are most impacted by the peat-fired power stations and so on like that. And I think most people agreed in the region they were never going to be the future, so therefore, but you do require and you do deserve replacement investment and industries.